The snow-clad peaks of the Rockies stood stark and unforgiving against the cold winter sky. The winds howled through the jagged cliffs, slicing through the silence like a blade, carrying with it the scent of impending storms. The mountain's vastness was both beautiful and terrifying, a wilderness where survival was a constant battle, and only the strongest creatures thrived. Beneath the towering ridges, the snow began to stain crimson, a tragic mark of the struggle that had unfolded just moments before. A massive grizzly bear lay crumpled in the snow, its body broken and lifeless from a violent encounter with a mountain lion. The tracks leading to the beast's final resting place told a story of desperation, a battle fought to the death. Yet amidst the grim scene, it was not the bear's lifeless form that caught the attention of the golden eagles soaring high above, but the faint, desperate cries carried by the biting wind. For a moment, the sound seemed almost lost in the gusts that whipped through the valley, but then they grew clearer. 3 small, distinct cries. They came from somewhere below, echoing against the rocky cliffs. Skye, the eagle, keen-eyed and sharp, had witnessed countless battles in these mountains, but something about these cries stirred something deep within her warrior's soul. The cries were soft and fragile, full of innocence and vulnerability, a stark contrast to the harshness of the mountain air. Most eagles would have ignored the cries, focusing instead on their own hunt, rabbits in the valley or fish in the streams below. But Skye wasn't like most eagles. She had lived for decades in these skies, a ruler of the mountain, and had learned that sometimes the laws of nature could be bent, if not broken altogether. Her heart faltered for just a moment as she spiraled downward, her wings cutting through the frigid air. What she would find in the shadows of the cliffs would change everything. This was not a normal rescue. This was the beginning of something that would reshape the very fabric of the mountain world. Skye's wings spread wide as she descended through the biting wind, her keen eyes scanning the treacherous landscape below. The mountain's jagged edges, covered in snow, created a sharp contrast to the soft, helpless cries that echoed from beneath the cliffs. It wasn't the sound of a predator in pain. It wasn't the call of a wounded animal seeking to defend itself. No, these were the cries of innocence. A plea for help from creatures too young and fragile to survive on their own in this unforgiving land. Skye glided lower, feeling the chill of the mountain air whip through her feathers, her instincts sharp as ever. Her heart, normally so cold and detached from the suffering of others, began to beat with a sense of urgency she hadn't felt in years. She was no stranger to death. The mountains were full of it. She had seen countless animals fall, either to hunger, to predators, or to the harsh elements. But these cries, they were different. They spoke to something deep within her, something primal and ancient. As Skye neared the cliffs, her sharp vision pierced the dim light, spotting a small cave carved into the rock. Inside, 3 tiny figures huddled together, their black fur dusted with snow, their small eyes barely open to the world around them. They were no larger than the mountain hares Skye usually hunted, their bodies trembling from the cold and their tiny paws weak from hunger. The 3 cubs, helpless and alone, seemed so fragile, so vulnerable, that it tugged at Skye's very soul. She perched on the edge of the cave, her claws sinking into the cold rock, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. The world around her was brutal, where only the fittest survived. Eagles and bears had always been rivals, each living in separate territories, crossing paths only in violent encounters. Bears were fierce, territorial, and untamable. And yet, here were 3 bear cubs, alone, abandoned by their mother in the most unforgiving of conditions. Skye's instincts screamed at her to fly away, to leave them to their fate. The natural order of things dictated that this was none of her concern. But there was something in the cub's cries, something that resonated with the deepest parts of her being. She had seen death many times before, but never like this. These cubs were not just helpless. They were innocent, their cries filled with a raw desperation that spoke to the very core of her heart. Skye's mind raced, her thoughts churning like the storm clouds gathering overhead. She had ruled these skies for 20 years, learning the rules of nature, respecting its laws, but In this moment, she found herself questioning those laws. She had always been the predator, the ruler of the air. Never had she considered the possibility of defying the natural order, of protecting something so vulnerable, something that was not her own kind. The cold mountain wind howled around her, but Skye's gaze never wavered from the cubs. Her wings, once strong and proud, felt heavy with the weight of the decision she now faced. The mountain night was closing in, the temperature plummeting rapidly, and hungry wolves were already starting their eerie chorus from the valleys below. The cubs had no chance of surviving through the night. Without their mother, they were destined to perish in the harsh elements. And then, without fully understanding why, Skye spread her wings wide and made a decision that would echo through the mountains for generations to come. She lowered herself gently into the cave, her warm feathers brushing against the trembling bodies of the cubs. They looked up at her, their wide eyes filled with fear and confusion. In that moment, Skye did something no eagle had ever done before. She wrapped her wings around them, protecting them from the cold and the inevitable death that loomed just outside. The warmth of her body radiated through her feathers, offering them a semblance of comfort in the face of the unforgiving night. Skye stayed awake through the long hours, her fierce eyes scanning the darkness, alert for any threat that might come near. Her heart, once hardened by years of survival, softened as she made a silent promise to herself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she would protect these little ones, these tiny cubs, who had called out to her for help in their darkest moment. This was no longer just about survival. This was about something much greater, something that would change the world in ways none of them could possibly understand. The days that followed were nothing short of extraordinary. As dawn broke over the cold, mountainous horizon, Skye stood watch over the three cubs huddled beneath her wings. The mountain air was sharp and biting, but beneath her feathers, the cubs found warmth, something they had never known in their short lives. The little ones, once trembling and weak, were now nestled closely to their protectress, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. Skye, though a fierce predator, had transformed into something far different. A guardian, a mother figure to creatures she once considered enemies. Each cub was different. Blaze, the largest, was always hungry, his deep ravenous growls echoing through the cave. Skye had quickly learned that he required twice the amount of food compared to the others. His appetite was insatiable, driving him to reach for the food Skye brought back from her hunting trips with eagerness and determination. He was bold and brash, charging through each day with an energy that matched the storms that often raged in the valleys below. Luna, the more cautious of the three, took her time. Her movements were deliberate, almost gentle. She didn't rush to devour her meals. Instead, she preferred to wait for Skye to break down the fish into smaller pieces. She was sensitive to her surroundings, her quiet nature offering a stark contrast to Blaze's boisterous personality. Luna seemed to observe everything with careful attention, as if she were pondering the world around her before making her next move. Then there was Echo, the smallest, the weakest. Skye had seen him struggle the most in those early days. He had difficulty swallowing solid food, and his tiny frame was frail against the harshness of the mountain's conditions. But it was Echo who had the most profound effect on Skye. His soft, almost inaudible whimpers tugged at her heart in ways she couldn't explain. It was as though he could sense her vulnerability, as though his very presence reminded her of something she had long forgotten, what it meant to care, truly care, for something other than herself. The more time they spent together, the stronger their bond became. Skye, ever the patient teacher, began to show the cubs the ways of the mountains. She taught them to read the air, to feel the subtle shifts in the wind that indicated an approaching storm. She taught them the art of stillness, how to remain calm when thunder rolled through the valleys and lightning split the sky. Skye, in her wisdom, knew that the mountain demanded respect, and it was only through learning its rhythms that the cubs would survive. The cubs, in turn, began to mimic her movements. They watched how Skye perched on the rocks, scanning the horizon with a keen eye. They learned to tilt their heads, just like her, listening for distant sounds, the rustle of leaves, the faint crunch of paws on snow. They learned to feel the air currents, sensing the weather changes that Skye had mastered over the years. But perhaps the most profound lesson of all was how to trust. Trust in their surroundings, trust in the wind, and most importantly, trust in Skye. As the days stretched into weeks, Skye found herself marveling at the transformations taking place in these three young cubs. They were growing stronger with each passing day, their bodies becoming more resilient, their instincts sharper. But it wasn't just their physical strength that Skye noticed. It was the way they moved through the world now, their heads always tilted upward, watching her soar high above, mimicking the way she used the wind to navigate the treacherous cliffs. It was as if in those moments they were no longer just bears. They were something more, something greater, something that transcended the boundaries of nature. What Skye had created was not just a bond between predator and prey, but a bond between two worlds, between sky and earth, between eagle and bear, and in that union the impossible had become possible. What no one could have predicted was that this unusual family, born from the most unlikely of circumstances, would soon prove to be more than just a guardian for each other. They would become a force that could reshape the very laws of nature itself. As the seasons shifted, so too did the cubs. What began as a desperate struggle for survival in the harsh, unforgiving mountains soon blossomed into something extraordinary. Blaze, Luna, and Echo grew stronger with each passing day, their bodies hardening and muscles becoming more defined as they adapted to the relentless challenges of their environment. But it was not just their physical transformations that were most striking. It was the quiet evolution in their hearts and minds. Under Skye's careful guidance, they were learning not only how to survive, but how to thrive in a world that, just months before, had seemed so hostile and distant. Blaze, the largest and most boisterous of the three, had quickly become a force to be reckoned with. His appetite, which once seemed insatiable, was matched only by his boundless energy. Every day he tested his strength, climbing higher, running faster, and never resting for long. Skye had taught him the importance of pacing himself, but Blaze, always the bold one, pushed forward with an eagerness that often left the others trailing behind. It was his hunger for life, his relentless spirit, that drove him to excel. He had learned to hunt with increasing skill, following Skye's example in the art of patience and precision. But Blaze was not without his vulnerabilities. Despite his size and strength, he sometimes found himself overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility, the desire to protect his new family, to live up to the legacy of the eagle who had taken him in. It was during these moments of doubt that Luna, the more cautious and thoughtful of the three, would offer him her quiet support. Luna had always been the most sensitive of the cubs, observing the world with an almost analytical mind. She was not driven by the same urgency as Blaze, but rather by a deep sense of awareness, absorbing every lesson with careful precision. She learned to move with grace, her quiet demeanor often leading her to take the time to analyze every situation before reacting. Luna had a natural ability to sense danger before it arrived, picking up on subtle shifts in the air and the sounds of the mountain that even Skye had sometimes missed. Her gentle nature made her the perfect protector of the smaller creatures of the mountain, often seen guiding them to safety during storms or dangers. And then there was Echo. The smallest, the one who had struggled the most in the beginning. His frailty had made him seem almost helpless at first. But under Skye's careful eye, he had flourished in ways that no one could have predicted. Echo had grown into a remarkable creature, his once weak limbs now sturdy and strong, his movements smooth and purposeful. But it was his unique gift that set him apart. Echo had inherited Skye's uncanny ability to mimic sounds, and it wasn't just the calls of his mother that he could imitate. He could replicate the warning cries of the eagle with such accuracy that the other birds of the mountain would respond to his call. Echo had become the bridge between worlds, the sky and the earth, the birds and the beasts. His cries, though soft, resonated through the valleys, signaling a harmony between predator and prey that was both beautiful and profound. Skye had always known that the cubs would grow strong, but she never expected that one of them would carry her voice in such an unexpected way. As the first snows of winter began to dust the mountain, Skye couldn't help but marvel at the incredible transformation she had witnessed. The cubs were no longer helpless infants struggling to survive. They had become a true family, a cohesive unit, bound by something far greater than biology. They had become a reflection of the harmony that Skye had once thought impossible between such different creatures. Blaze, Luna, and Echo were no longer simply three bear cubs. They were warriors in their own right, and Skye's legacy was already beginning to take shape within them. The mountain had tested them, had shaped them into something far greater than any one of them could have become alone. They were ready for whatever lay ahead. Together, as a family, winter descended on the mountains with an unforgiving cold, the once vibrant peaks now draped in a heavy blanket of snow. The wind howled through the valleys, carrying with it the promise of another brutal season. Skye had raised the cubs through countless storms and trials, each test strengthening the bond between them. But now something new lingered in the air. An unspoken tension that seemed to hang over the land like a storm cloud, ready to burst. The cubs had grown strong, each in their own way, but the real test of their transformation was still ahead. One cold afternoon, as Skye soared high above the mountain ridges, her sharp eyes caught sight of a new threat. A pack of wolves, their hunger-driven howls carrying over the frozen landscape, had begun to encircle the mountain. They were closing in, driven by desperation and the need to find food before the deep winter left them starving. Skye had seen these wolves before, fierce, determined, and relentless in their pursuit of survival, but they had never dared to challenge her. Not until now. The wolves knew better than to confront an eagle of Skye's strength, but they were different this time. There was an urgency to their movements, an intelligence that suggested they had grown bolder. And now they had caught the scent of the cubs, the scent of easy prey in the frozen wilderness. Skye's heart clenched as she saw the pack begin to circle lower and lower, their eyes fixed on the cubs. It was time for the final battle. Skye descended quickly, her wings beating fiercely against the frigid air, alerting the cubs below. Blaze, Luna, and Echo looked up, their instincts kicking in. The time for teaching had passed. It was now time for them to put everything they had learned into action. Blaze, ever the bold one, was the first to charge forward, his large frame moving with surprising agility. He had grown stronger with each hunt, his muscles now honed to perfection. He wasn't about to let these wolves take his family. Luna, calm and collected, immediately took position near the edge of the cave, her eyes scanning the terrain for any sign of movement. Her sharp senses allowed her to detect the wolves' approach before they made their presence known. She remained still, waiting, knowing that every moment was precious in the coming fight. Echo, though smaller than his siblings, was no less determined. His keen ears twitched, and he began to call out to the birds overhead, his imitation of Skye's cry ringing through the air. The sound was more than just a call for help. It was a signal, a way of communicating with the other creatures of the mountain, telling them that danger was near. Skye, high above, saw her youngest cub's efforts, a smile tugging at her beak as she swooped lower to join them. The wolves, sensing the cub's alertness and the growing danger, hesitated for just a moment. It was all the time Blaze needed. With a powerful swipe of his claws, he lunged at the closest wolf, knocking it off balance. Luna followed suit, her calculated moves quick and precise, striking from the shadows with a silent grace that left the wolves no room to retaliate. Echo, though still young, had learned to use his small size to his advantage. He darted between the wolves, leading them away from the others with his clever distractions. His cries filled the air, confusing the pack, sending them into disarray as they tried to track him down. Skye, in the midst of the chaos, dove into the fray, her talons flashing through the air like lightning. Her once solitary battle for survival had now become a fight for her family. Together, the cubs and Skye fought back against the wolves, the sound of their struggle echoing through the mountain valleys. The battle was fierce, but it was not one that would last long. The wolves, now realizing that they were no match for the combined force of Skye and the cubs, began to retreat, their howls fading into the distance. When the last wolf had disappeared over the ridgeline, the mountains were quiet once more. The snow, untouched by the chaos, began to settle again. Skye and the cubs stood together, breathing heavily but triumphant. The battle was over, but the true test had just begun. They had proven their strength, their unity, and their ability to face the challenges of the wild together. Skye looked at her cubs, now grown into formidable creatures in their own right, and knew that this victory, though hard-won, was only the beginning. The mountain world was vast and full of dangers, but together they could face anything. The bond they shared had proven to be stronger than the laws of nature, and with it, they would continue to rewrite the story of the wild. With the wolves driven off and the immediate danger behind them, the mountain was once again a place of quiet peace. But Skye, perched high above the ridgeline, couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed forever. The battle had not only proven their strength, but it had also solidified something deeper, something that had grown stronger with each passing day, the unbreakable bond between her and the cubs. This bond was no longer just one of protection. It had evolved into something that transcended nature's rigid rules. In the aftermath of the battle, life returned to a new rhythm. The cubs, though tired, had shown their true capabilities, adapting to the demands of the harsh wilderness with a new confidence. Their once individual struggles to survive had merged into a shared strength, something that set them apart from the rest of the creatures in the mountains. They were no longer just bears. Blaze, Luna, and Echo had become guardians in their own right, working alongside Skye, but in ways that were uniquely their own. Blaze's ability to predict shifts in the weather, something he had developed through his bond with Skye, became invaluable. He would stand tall on the highest ridges, his head tilted to the wind, and give a soft, eagle-like call. The call carried across the valley, a signal to the other animals that a storm was coming, or that the temperature was about to drop. In this way, Blaze had become a living weather vane for the entire mountain, warning creatures of impending dangers. It was a gift that the mountain animals had come to rely on, knowing that the giant bear was not just a force to be reckoned with, but a harbinger of survival. Luna, ever the gentle one, became the mountain's quiet protector. Her ability to move silently through the forest allowed her to tend to the wounded or sick creatures who couldn't find shelter in time. Whether it was a hurt deer or a struggling rabbit, Luna's watchful eyes always found those in need. Her calm presence had earned her the title of the gentle guardian among the mountain's creatures. She was the one they turned to when danger approached, knowing she would guide them to safety. And then there was Echo, the smallest, yet the one with the most surprising ability. His mimicry of the eagle's warning cry had become legendary. On quiet evenings, Echo would sit with his siblings and call out to the birds, who responded by circling overhead, protecting the mountain with their keen eyes. His cries were not just a call for attention, but a bridge between the bears and the eagles, a harmony between earth and sky that no creature had ever seen before. Together, they had transformed the landscape of the Rockies. They were no longer two separate worlds, one of eagle and one of bear. The mountain had become a place of unity, where predators and prey no longer fought for dominance but worked in unison to ensure that all could survive. The bond between Skye and her cubs, forged in the most unlikely of circumstances, had broken down the natural boundaries that had once defined their existence. The new world they had created wasn't just about survival. It was about community, compassion, and the understanding that sometimes the most unexpected relationships can change the world. And in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, the animals learned that unity, above all else, was the greatest force of all. The story of Skye and the 3 bear cubs teaches us profound lessons about unity, compassion, and the power of unexpected connections. In the wild, where survival often depends on strength and instinct, Skye and the cubs break through the boundaries of nature to form a unique bond that transcends their differences. They learn to work together, not just as separate beings, but as a united family, relying on each other's strengths and abilities. This is a reminder that, in our own lives, the most powerful relationships often arise when we embrace those who are different from us, offering compassion and support in times of need. As we grow older, we may face challenges that require us to lean on others, whether it's our loved ones, friends, or even communities. Just as Skye and the cubs showed, it's through these shared bonds that we find strength. The story reminds us that true harmony is found in embracing diversity and working together, rather than letting differences drive us apart. Whether in nature or in life, unity, compassion, and understanding can overcome even the toughest of obstacles, making us stronger together than we ever could be alone. As we witness the power of unity and compassion in the bond between Skye and the cubs, we're reminded that the greatest strength often lies in working together despite differences. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to our channel to continue sharing heartfelt stories of friendship, loyalty, and resilience. Let's spread these powerful messages together.